Hi, my name is Jake Miller and this is the Game Changer series on Unfiltered. Today I'm very privileged to be joined by Jeremy Moon, the founder of iconic Kiwi company Icebreaker. Jeremy founded Icebreaker in 1995, the year I was born, as a matter of coincidence, as a 24-year-old, and has grown the brand from a dream into a rapidly expanding company, now sold in 5,000 stores, 40 countries with 450 staff. In this exclusive interview, we're going to be delving into Jeremy's story, how he got started, the fashion industry, innovation, exports, international business, and as always, Jeremy's advice for you as business leaders. Great to see you, Jeremy.
Cool, good to be here again.
Thanks so much for coming into the studio. So I guess to kick this off, what would you say is probably the most transformative business experience that you think you've ever had that's probably taught you the most about business?
Well, I don't think about single experiences. Like when I reflect on the business and certainly the way forward, it's always about waves. Like we've actually got a metaphor we call waves of changes. So if you imagine the business curve, you can break it down to these different waves, and each wave is like a mini transformation. So my experience of Icebreaker has been this kind of pulsive on-off transformation. So I'll give you an example. The first transformation was moving from pure white and blue thermal underwear to creating an apparel system. That was a big deal because we needed totally different skills. Then we moved from a New Zealand company to beginning offshore. That was a really big transformation. From there, we moved our manufacturing offshore to become an international business, etc., etc. So the whole challenge with the business is actually recognizing what the next phase is and seeing transformation as an ongoing and regular normal part of business.
So what's the next wave?
So the next wave for us is about building a much more customer-centric company. So we've shifted from being quite a classic wholesale company where we sell through other people's stores, and now we've got 28 of our own retail stores across US, Canada, New Zealand and Australia, and a strong e-commerce business. So to inform a direct-to-consumer business, we have to get a lot closer to our consumers. We really relied on a lot of our insights coming from the retailers, and that requires a different team and quite a rewiring of the business. It's a really exciting transition, actually.
Right, and when you look back over those waves you've mentioned, from changing from the underwear to the shirts to all the other waves, what would you say has been the most challenging one so far?
The most challenging for me was moving our manufacturing from New Zealand to China in 2003, because the identity shift in the business from being a made in New Zealand business to an international business from New Zealand required a lot of kind of forgiveness from our customers who saw us as this New Zealand battler brand. But what I was committed to, and what the team have always been committed to, is actually the question, what does it take to build an international brand from New Zealand? So we ended up partnering with a French company, a German company, a Japanese company based in Shanghai, and that gave us access to the same economies of scale, capability and technology that all our competitors were going to have. If we didn't do that, we would have got eaten. Right. It was a really tough transformation, and it's been the making of the business.
Okay, fantastic. And I want to delve more into that, especially manufacturing in China, a little bit later in the interview. But I want to talk a little bit more about the early days now, in particular when you got started. And I guess many Kiwis know your amazing story of how when you discovered your love for Merino in 1994, you're 24 years old, traveling around New Zealand with your American girlfriend at the time. Is that, you still with her, or is that?
I wouldn't I wouldn't call it a long-term relationship.
Right, okay. Before quitting research job, mortgaging your house and starting this company. So what's the Jeremy Moon story that hasn't been told, you know? Because there's so much, the story's been told, and as I say, so many people know it. What's something that hasn't been told about you, about the early days?
Well, I guess to understand why, I lived in the States when I was 10 and when I was 12. Okay. My father taught medicine and my family travelled a lot. And so we're always travelling as a family. So I grew up seeing the world as small. And I had this dream actually in my mind of kind of living in a diamond shape, being based in New Zealand and moving between North America, Europe, Asia, and back to New Zealand, because that's kind of how I grew up.
Right.
So I was really looking for something that would let me do that. And secondly, I had a real epiphany when I was about 12. I've been reading quite a lot of books, kind of theoretical physics books,
Yep.
and I really understood the power of nature. And I was a very passionate New Zealander, because when I was living overseas, to fit in, I would tell people stories and I'd give slideshows to my class and stuff.
Yeah.
So for me, it was actually about kind of joining the dots between my identity that I'd formed growing up, and how I could mould that into a path for my life.
Right. So when you look back at that vision you had for yourself as a young person to what it is today, is it better or what you expected?
I wouldn't call it a vision, it was more like a dream.
A dream, okay.
So I knew it was possible, I just didn't know what it would look like.
Right. Do you feel like you're there?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of it. Yeah, that's right, definitely.
Yep, fantastic. And when you look back over those early days and the discovery that effectively led to the start of Icebreaker, do you have the same excitement for the brand now as that you did in 1995?
Yeah, when I think about the future, I feel excited. When I think about the team we've got, I feel incredibly proud. When I think about the progress that we're making, and also when I think about the challenges in front of us, we've got hundreds of competitors. And it puts a lot of pressure on us to get better every year. I find that very exciting. And also the world around us is so dramatically different. I don't just mean the internet, online, all that type of stuff, and social media. I mean the fashion trends. Sport brands are fashion brands are outdoor brands are getting into street fashion. So all the consumer trends and all the digital trends are all kind of mashing up. Now you can launch a company on Kickstarter, right? We didn't have the internet when we started Icebreaker.
Right.
So I didn't have an email address for 3 years.
Wow.
Everything was done by fax. You probably don't even know what one of them is, right?
I remember them. I was very young.
Yeah, so because the world is constantly changes and the challenges are constantly fresh, that's what it makes me feel excited. I'm never excited by the past or the status quo.
Okay. What are you most proud of?
Well, definitely the teams that we've got. So we've managed to build a company of, close to 500 people, all of which behave like New Zealanders, even though 80% of our team are not Kiwis. So we've managed to attract really like-minded souls who are authentic and adventurous and achievers and really passionate. So, for example, on Friday, I'm in Portland, Oregon, working with the design team. Then I go to Munich and work with a European team at a trade show. And wherever I am, it's just working with amazing people, like-minded souls, and that actually is really inspiring.
Right, so the people you work with are the ones who energise you?
Yeah, totally.
Yep, okay. And when you decide to chuck your job in as a project manager, and I believe the company was CM Research, convincing your friend Michelle Mitchell, she was in the law industry, to chuck her career in as well and drive around New Zealand attempting to sell these first Icebreaker products. What was the biggest fear when you did that?
Oh, there was no fear. It was more like a question. It was more like a belief. This will work if I don't screw it up, was my mantra, right? The idea was so good, I knew it would work unless I screwed it up. So I just kept on driving quite a tough accountability in myself not to screw it up.
Okay.
So when you go in with a I don't want to screw it up mindset, your head is full of questions and you see the world as a jigsaw. You probably find it with your business in terms of what do I need to do next, So you've got this sense of what needs to be achieved, and it's a matter of kind of sequencing the pieces, really.
What would you say were the greatest challenges?
Well, everything was a challenge. I didn't know how to make clothes, I didn't know how to design clothes, I didn't have any money, I'd never run a business, and no one knew who I was. So it wasn't a great starting point, right? But we had a product that was amazing. We had a structure that started with a very strong brand identity through using great designers. I raised enough money to be able to afford to work with world-class design team initially, and we had an endorsement from Sir Peter Blake, who gave it to us free, right? Saying, wore my icebreakers for 43 days and 43 nights, and I'm never wearing synthetics again. So, so that will get me in the door, and then people go, Waller's dead, and I go, yeah, Waller's dead, it sucks, try this, it's merino, and then I'd give them a t-shirt, and I'd come back in a month, and they'd all want to know what the hell's going on, and they'd tell me stories about their icebreaker. So yeah, that's how we got.
Yeah, and you mentioned how you got the capital together. How did you do that?
So I wrote a business plan, and that took me 3 months, and that was really just saying, hey, we're going to build an international brand from New Zealand. Everyone's going to win, our customers, our partners, and investors, and this is how we're going to do it. And it just kind of broke it down. We're going to get some money, we're going to clarify this brand idea, we're going to design a product to reflect it, we're going to set up distribution, we're going to manufacture it like this, we're going to do that for a while and get better at it, and then we're going to start going overseas.
Right, so with that business plan you're able to pitch to people to raise the money that you needed?
Correct.
Okay, and you had key people on board such as Noel Todd from the Todd family and so on. So these amazing people surrounding you and helping you. So how did you build those key relationships to be able to get those people on board?
So it was all the investors bought something. There were 8 investors who put in 25 grand, and they all bought something, brought some skills to the business. So my old boss at CM Research is an expert in research and consumer insights. So he was my advisor there. A friend of mine ran a PR business. He put in some money. He taught me how to use active language, how to use language to create a sense of possibility for people in the business plan. A friend of mine's father was the head of commercial at BNZ, Peter Travers. He taught me how to do forward projections, and he became a director. I know Noel's daughter Juliet. She introduced me to her dad. He was inspired by the passion and knew I'd screw it up if I didn't have good people, so he wanted to help me not screw it up, So people were attracted to the passion and the belief, and they kind of wanted to be a part of it.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so getting these I guess critical people that all bring something to the table seemed like quite a unique thing in a way. Like you had quite a lot of investors, but they all brought something different. Is that something you'd recommend to other startups?
Well, again, I stood in, this will screw up if I don't get all the help, because I don't know how to do any of this stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
So even when it came to manufacturing, I'd go to Timaru and watch the people at Alliance Textiles make the fabrics until I understood that. I'd go to Temuka and watch the woman make the garments until I understood that. I'd go to Waimate and understand how the knitting process worked. So just watching everything and asking lots of questions, I could begin to piece together how all the pieces worked in my mind, but I wasn't an expert in any of them. So I reckon the best way for a young person to start a business is to get super clear on what success looks like, and then find people who can contribute to all the gaps, which will be basically everything if you haven't done it before, and then just drink the blood of others, right? But it needs to be done in a way that's rewarding for other people. You need to constantly be recognising people's contribution. You need to be giving them feedback. You need to be demonstrating that their ideas are having an impact, so they get a sense of their contribution actually shaping the person and the business. So I tried to be generous in recognising the contribution that people were making, and then that's why, for example, people like Noel and Peter were directors and on the journey with me for 18 years as directors until they retired.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. So just to finish off on your story, it did take off though, didn't it?
Well, it took 7 years, right, I was working 70 to 100-hour weeks. We didn't have a team for 2 or 3 years. It was just kind of battle. And the first year we made a $156,000 loss on 200 grand's capital. I needed to raise another 40. We're down to about 70 grand. There was no VC money. There were no big checks, right? It was really hard to raise capital.
Okay, how'd it feel in year 2 when you made your first profit of $512?
Well, Noel Todd said to me, this is the first company I've been in where you can drink the profits and still remain sober. So it was like, he was just kind of going, nice one, but you know, let's stay focused.
Okay.
It was a turning point though, because it was a good discipline, because it meant, what profitability meant was that we weren't running out of cash. And running out of cash is like, you know, cutting your wrist on the human body, right? Or the life drains out of you. It's exactly the same. So it taught me that profitability is important, and not having too much capital was really important, because overheads were very, very lean. You know, I'd stay in my car some nights, I'd stay in backpackers, I was staying at $13 a night places, right? You know, baked beans in the back of the car type of stuff. And it just kind of meant you had to, it was just pretty gritty.
Yeah, so you had that vision of building the global brand from New Zealand. So to finish off on this section, what would you say was the one biggest struggle of building the global brand from New Zealand?
Well, no one wants to do business with New Zealanders. Everyone loves us because we're great to party with and we get on with everyone, right? So we had to set up local experts who would become us.
Right.
So in Germany we've got Germans, and Canadians, it's all Canadians. And France is run by the French. I haven't got Kiwis in France. So it took quite a long time. So our job was to go over and find like-minded souls, get them revved up, kind of teach them our belief system and how to be us, support the hell out of them, and then let them free. And that's really the philosophy behind the business.
Fantastic. So let's just talk a little bit about innovation now. To start with, very broadly, what does innovation look like within Icebreaker?
So we've got a process, a go-to-market process. And we start by trying to understand the market trends. And so if you think about the outdoor industry, you know, that's like mountain biking, it's snow sports, it's hiking, and there are different types of stores. You know, a skiing store is different to a camping store. So we kind of break down the market into channels, and where we've got our own retail stores, and we look at the trends within that, and we get a bit of a sense at a market level, and then we read all our consumer feedback, what people write to us on their website, because they give us great product feedback. And then we look at the data in terms of what's moving and what isn't. And then we place bets about where we want to focus our innovation in the future. You know, do we want to get into doing woolen shoes, or would we prefer to put more effort into our jackets, you know? So you've always got limited resources, so you're kind of placing bets across what categories.
And is it a challenge to I guess, just like, I know if you look at some of the great companies in the world, an example I can think of is Apple, when Steve Jobs came back, just slashed so many products to just focus on a few. Is that a philosophy you follow as well? Just focus on a few really critical?
Well, that's what I'm going through at the moment. So with having Rob as our CEO, I can work with him and focus on more strategic issues, like how do we reduce our big product range down to the pieces that really are excellent and move the dial. So I'm definitely going through a quality, not quantity phase. It got too big and too confusing.
Right, so less but better you think is the way forward?
Correct.
Okay, fantastic. So how do you create a work environment where staff feel like, I guess, their ideas are valued and that they can contribute to this innovation?
So we're big on accountability, and we're big on really strong leadership. So we hire amazing people from all around the world, and some of them have come from, you know, our head of product was at Nike for years. So they're very experienced people, and they have to build their own teams and deliver a really high standard of work. So we kind of hire experts, they build great teams, and they're fully accountable for the decisions and the outcomes they drive. So it's very much about finding great people and trusting them.
Okay, so when one of these experts or someone within their team comes up with an innovation, what does the process look like, I guess, from having that idea to seeing it go to the market?
So there's very different trends out of, for example, Europe between the US versus, for example, New Zealand, right? And Europe want it kind of tight and bright, America want it kind of floppy and, you know, looser fitting and more traditional colours. So we've got a team within Europe of our best people that pull the trends together there, similarly in North America, similarly in New Zealand and Australia, and then they feed up their view of the consumer and the market through to the product team, and the product team then try and find best fit. So we've kind of got these catchment areas for innovation within each region.
Right, okay, so regional innovation is important. You can't just innovate. I guess there's some things you can innovate across the whole company, but it's quite specific to regions.
Well, we do innovate across the whole company. Everyone gets the innovation, but we get the insights and the feedback at a regional level.
Is innovation expensive?
Well, it's just a natural part of life. You can't have it as an optional, shall we innovate or not? Right, every season we have to come up with new ideas to keep the brand fresh, to keep people interested in us, to keep us having new stories, to go back and connect with people around.
Okay.
So it's just a natural part of business. So innovation for us has a 2-year constant repeating time frame, and then they trickle through and then they get into the market. And we're always just trying stuff, and half of it doesn't reach the market, half of it doesn't work, might have been a bad idea, run out of time, someone beat us to it, but the best ideas always come through.
So when one of those executives or someone from within that executive's team comes up with one of these new ideas, what does the process look like from coming up with the idea to taking it to the market?
So we break our insights into regions, because the trends in Europe are really different than the US, for example. Europe likes tight, lean, elegant, bold colours. US likes floppier fit, more earthy colours. So if, for example, someone's based in Europe and they've got some big ideas, we've got a product panel, a team of experts in Europe. If they're in the US, similarly, we've got a similar team. So we get the insights at a regional level that gets fed through to the product team, and then they make a call about what the key new ideas that we're going to back, and then everyone gets it. So we don't do product A for Europe and product B for the US. We try and find out what's kind of common and where we can, spread our innovations globally.
Okay, and in terms of innovation, it sounds like all the people are very innovative, you're very innovative, and what I love about it as well is the CEO, Rob Fyfe, is obviously very innovative as well, and if you look at what he achieved at Air New Zealand, it was incredible. So what would you say you've learned from Rob Fyfe about innovation that you didn't know before?
Well, Rob's very good at making trade-offs. So I'm kind of quite additive. I want to do everything at once, typical kind of entrepreneur. Yeah, it's a great idea, let's do it. Yeah, let's do that. Rob's like, hold on, scarce resources, let's do a few things really well, and if we do all of those, there'll be a big trade-off around quality of execution, etc. So he's really good at slowing people down and getting them to really understand the consequences of doing it, what does success look like, and the resources it will take, and the impact of that decision on the business holistically. Because if we do that, it means we can't do other stuff. So is that the right thing to do? He's very methodical. He is a very innovative guy, but he's very thoughtful and methodical as well.
Right, yeah.
So when you're in a really bustly, fast environment, someone like Rob is a really good counterpoint.
Okay.
Yeah.
What would you say are some of the other lessons that you think you've learned from Rob?
Well, he's a very good people person, and he's very fierce on accountability. So when he hires people, and together we've kind of rebuilt the executive team, they have a lot of responsibility, a lot of autonomy, and they are totally responsible for delivering results.
Okay.
So he'll give people a lot of encouragement and space, but totally demands results. And the consequence, if they don't deliver the results, is they might not be in the right business, or they might not be in the right role, because he is all about building a high-performance team. So that on one side can sound a bit ruthless, but he's also very humanistic, and people love working with him. So yeah, he's a very inspiring guy to work with, because he's demanding, but also a great human being as well.
Right. So it's interesting what you say as well about the almost kind of level-headedness in terms of looking at the products and less but better kind of thing. So you would say what his main strength is of innovation is almost looking at all of the great ideas and working out what's going to be the few that you pick.
Yeah, he's very good at forcing people to really understand the longer term consequence of a decision, and also to really make sure that the decisions are informed by consumer insights. He really rebuilt Air New Zealand based on consumer insights. So he's bringing a lot of that thinking to Icebreaker, which is really great for us.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's talk about the fashion industry now. And I read that you design 18 months ahead. So how do you work out what people are going to want to wear in 18 months?
Well, it's just a combination of retail feedback, consumer feedback, and trends. And the other aspect is just some gut feel, because we've got new ideas. For example, this fabric is a blend of merino and tencel. And tencel is a plant-based fabric. And we found that it dries faster and it's amazing for summer, so we launched a new product called Cool Light this summer. So that's not like, no research would tell us that. But we just know that, some people find our products too warm in summer, and people are loving nature-based technologies. So we kind of take those trends and bang our innovation behind it.
Working 18 months ahead, have you ever got it terribly wrong?
Well, sometimes we're too slow and sometimes we're too fast. Sometimes you get an idea the market isn't ready for.
Okay. What's an example of that?
So we did quite an edgy street range about 3 or 4 years ago, and because we didn't have the distribution for it, all the outdoor stores hated it because it was too cool for them. But if we did that now, because we've got 30 of our own stores, it would be fantastic.
Right, and you've said before that the focus is not on disposable fashion, so people keep their icebreakers. I think my first one I got, was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I think I still have it.
Have you washed it?
I have, yeah. But I guess if you compare that to something like Nike, right, the type of brand that the latest pair of shoes comes out and people want them. So is that problematic ever, because people do keep their stuff for so long that they don't feel like they always need to rush to the icebreaker store to get the new thing?
Well, that's why we do a lot of categories, because I want you to buy base layer products that you can wear in 7 years' time. But we also do t-shirts and underwear and socks and mid layers and outer layers and hats and gloves. So I'd rather you bought a few things across different categories and had them all last for a long time. But I don't need you to change your wardrobe, every year.
Yeah. But you probably don't want to keep your undies for 7 years, right?
Well, maybe you do,
Right. So in fashion as well, that emotional part's quite important, where people have that almost emotional attachment to the brand. So what's been your strategy for sharing that brand story with your consumers?
So we've got millions of people that come through our website. Social media is beginning to take off, and we've got these amazing retail stores all around the world that are very passionate people in our outdoor stores in Verbier or Chamonix or St Anton or Telluride or Aspen, you name it. There's Americans or Swiss or whoever passionately selling Icebreaker, introducing our brand to people around the world. So it is very relationship focused, it's very human focused, and having now almost 30 of our own retail stores, that's a great medium for us to tell new stories. So really enjoying learning about that.
Right, so you want to ramp those up and open more retail stores?
Yeah, not too aggressively, but we'll do 4 or 5 new stores this year.
Okay, fantastic. And you mentioned you've got these people in all these sort of exquisite locations really passionate about Icebreaker. So it's a strategy to get those people believing in it so that they sell it to their people.
Yeah, we've always been really focused on the people in the outdoor stores. So when someone comes in looking for the North Face or Patagonia or one of the big outdoor brands, those people can steer them towards, hey, have you tried this?
Yeah.
What do you want that for?
Okay. And you've said before that Icebreaker only chooses to be stocked in about 72 of the 500 outdoor and sportswear stores in New Zealand. Why is that?
Oh, because a lot of them are just super, cheap, budget oriented, and we'd rather do more business with fewer partners that will do a really good job of service. It's not about flooding the market. And also, New Zealand's a small place. So we try and pick the best outdoor stores in every country that we're operating in.
Yeah, almost that restriction of supply seems to be quite a consistent thing. We've talked about Fashion. Karen Walker said they do the same thing with their brand. So you've got to, I guess it's about knowing where your brand fits in terms of...
Correct, and finding like-minded souls to distribute.
Okay, because you can damage it, I presume, if you go too low, or if you go too high, it won't be the right market.
Exactly.
Great. Okay, so let's talk about exports now. And I know this is something you're very passionate about and have done a lot of work with NZTE and so on in the past. So it's sold in 5,000 stores, 40 countries, so a hugely impressive network. And you mentioned some of those places before, you know, all around the world there are these towns and cities selling icebreakers. So as an exporter, what's been your strategy for getting your product out to all of these stores around the world?
So we started with distributors. So a distributor buys our product at a cheaper price and then sells it to a retail network. And the good thing is that they buy it in bulk and they pay you when it kind of ships from the factory. So when you're starting a business, that's very important, because you can't have someone selling to some outdoor store in Germany because you don't know if you're going to get paid. So this way you kind of like, you know you're going to get paid, you have a lower margin, but you've got a local expert doing the work. So after a few years, we actually, you know, in the Netherlands, for example, we've been working with the same partner since 1999, right? 16 years. But in Switzerland, after 6 years, we bought their business and we set up our own company there. So we've got a number of subsidiaries across Europe and US and Canada and Australia and New Zealand, where we own those businesses, and some we have partnerships. But when you're starting out, it's very important to find people who will kind of pay you up front so you don't run out of cash, who will take the risk on that. And
buy a bulk amount of your product.
Yeah, and then use their expertise, you know, with you as a partner. So I'd go over and I'd sit in the car with the sales reps and drive around and meet with the retailers. They'd do the transactional stuff, they'd do the deals. I'd do the sales clinics where I'd explain to everyone what the idea was and what the philosophy was. And I did that for years and years and years and years and years, right? In fact, I still do it. But it's about finding great local partners initially, and then when you can afford it, setting up a subsidiary.
And through icebreaker.com, I see on your website that the brand is now sold in countries from Austria to Norway, Russia, Luxembourg, Chile. So I guess going into these countries, how do you find the right agents to be able to distribute your product?
Okay, well, I'll give you two examples. Norway, so we went into Norway, we spoke to the retailers, and we said, who are the best people here? So we went back from the retailers to find the best distributors to the retailers. And that's how we found Henrik in Norway.
Right.
In another country like, for example, the UK, I really, really wanted to get into Snow and Rock. I saw them as the pinnacle store. It's the kind of best store in the UK. So I just knocked on their door until I got an appointment. I convinced the buyer to try an order. I went down and did pizza and beer with all the people in the store until they understood Icebreaker, and I gave everyone a great deal. I did that for 3 years. Sales grew to £100,000. And I said, Sharon, I can't do this anymore, I'm exhausted, I need a partner. And she goes, there's only one person, you need Corey Taylor. So I rang Corey and he goes, no, not interested. And I said, Sharon. And she rang Corey and said, Corey, if you don't meet Jeremy, I'm going to cancel my £600,000 Mountain Hardware order. And he goes, be delighted to meet him, Sharon, that sounds great. And then as soon as Corey and I actually met each other, got on like a house on fire, stayed at his house, and we've been business partners for 14 years, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So working your way back from the retail stores and building the relationship with the distributor.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it. Okay. But it's actually all about relationships, and you know, I really enjoy hanging out with these guys. They're very cool.
Yeah. So I presume I can know the answer to this from what you just said. But what are you looking for in an agent? Does it come back to that almost friendship?
Yeah, you're looking for people who are driven and ambitious and disruptive and really fun, that you'll enjoy doing business with, that you look forward to having dinner with, you know? So, you know, our values are adventurous, authentic, passionate and achiever. So they're the kind of 4 conditions. And normally those types of people are really fun, you know, and get shit done, right? But you also want someone who will try on a new idea and have the same belief that we have about bringing nature-based technologies to the outdoor industry.
Okay, what would you say is a mistake you've made exporting that you think other Kiwi businesses could learn from?
Quite often we get, inquiries from someone would think, oh, okay, well, we're not in that market, always a disaster. I can't think of one inquiry I've had where it's ended up, well, there's one actually, but someone says, oh, I want to distribute in Korea, and we go, well, we'll never get there otherwise, why not? And then
I understand. So when they come to you, they're usually bad.
Yeah, because normally they're like twiddling their thumbs, kind of, successful people are normally busy and kind of have a lot on their plate.
Yep.
So our approach is to find the best distributors and then, seduce them. Because they're not looking for new brands. They're not looking, if they're successful, they're full, right?
Absolutely. So where's the main future focus for distribution? I guess it's across retail stores, partner stores, online, and all three of those. But what would you say is the biggest focus?
Well, Europe's 40% of our business, North America's 40% of our business, right? So that's obviously a huge ongoing focus. New Zealand, Australia, we've got a great team here. We've rebuilt that. That's getting a lot more love. We're doing a few more retail stores. That's really cool. But we're opening a new store in Beijing in a few months. I'm very excited about that. Okay. So I'll be putting personally quite a lot of focus into Asia, China in particular.
Fantastic. And I've got a few questions about China now in our international business section. So I guess in 2003, you mentioned right at the start of the interview when you transitioned manufacturing from New Zealand to Shanghai. So when you did that, what would you say was the biggest challenge you faced?
I'm used to going down to the factory and understanding what happened, right? So you needed a high level of trust and you needed total transparency around the ethics, because the thing that terrified me was working with a factory that had child labour or poor environmental standards and being an absolute hypocrite trying to promote a natural alternative to synthetics, yet exploiting children or the environment as a consequence. So we needed to find a really, really trusted partner. And so you can't tell anything about a country, right? If you want the worst manufacturing, go to China. But if you want the best, also go to China. It's all about who you do business with, not where, really. So we found this company, and they built a factory for us. And we've been working with them for 12 years since that, right? Wow. And they do 2 million garments, just that one factory. Okay. And we built that business together. So I favour long-term relationships. We call it narrow and deep. Do deep, big business with fewer number of people that share the same values.
Right. So what are the advantages of manufacturing in China?
Scale, all the innovation. The Chinese people now, very, very entrepreneurial and very innovative. Okay. Very innovative. Oh my goodness. Restless innovators. And they just get shit done. And the environmental standards, for the new factories are now very high, higher than Europe in some cases. Their technology is the best in the world because they buy all their equipment for textiles from Italy or Japan, and the level of skill of the workers is incredibly high. So it's all about who you partner with. The factories in China are of higher standard ethically than some of the factories I worked with in New Zealand.
Okay, are there any disadvantages in China that you didn't face in New Zealand?
Only the distance, yeah. Right. But everything else is an advantage. Trading in US dollars because no one wants to buy stuff in New Zealand dollars. Access to scale, access to technology.
Is managing quality control hard?
No, we hire a Japanese company to do it.
Right.
They're fierce.
Okay. Yeah, fantastic. So just finally on international business, I guess when you're going into a market, when you went into China to do the manufacturing there, you mentioned you found this company, they built a factory for you and so on. How did you find a company like that? Where'd you start?
So I had a woman working for me who was who was a Kiwi. He'd done quite a lot of work for other companies in China, and she knew these people, and we'd done a small trial with them, and we liked each other. And then he wanted to kind of break away from his business partner and do something new, and we worked out that deal, and they built that factory based on that. So it was It was really based on existing reputations and networks and knowledge,
Yeah. And just finally, with IP, how do you protect that in China?
Just the same way as we do in every other country. We've got an in-house lawyer who has local lawyers, because Italian law is nothing like Canadian law. So you have, Italian specialist in Italy and a Canadian advisor in Canada, coordinated all from New Zealand.
Yep. Okay, fantastic. So I've just got our rapid burst questions to finish off now. So what would you say is the best?
Oh God, here we go.
I've got something written here. What does that say?
It says C word.
Who wrote that?
I didn't write it. You put a footnote saying don't say the C word like you did in your last interview. Well done, by the way, you haven't.
Right. What's the best business book you've ever read?
Probably, I never read books, I skim them, those type of books. Good to Great. I love the idea of a hedgehog concept, being in the best of the world, being in the best in the world at something. Icebreaker wants to be the best in the world at nature-based apparel.
Okay, fantastic. If you hadn't studied your Bachelor of Commerce and Master of Commerce and Marketing, University of Otago, do you believe you would have been able to achieve what you have, or do you think university has not really been that significant in your success?
I wouldn't have been able to organise my thoughts.
Right, so it was a significant part of your business success?
Yeah, I probably would have been a film director actually.
Okay, fantastic. What's the best piece of advice you're ever given, and by whom?
Noel Todd said to me once, look, I know there's the internet, I know everything's faster, but business is the same as it's always been. It's all about people.
Okay, fantastic. 16-year-old boy, what would you think of the man you've become, the 16-year-old boy you were?
Oh, probably quite excited, doing all the things that I love, feeling proud of the products that we make and the team that we do, living in New Zealand, which I love, being able to travel heaps, doing lots of outdoor sports, connected to nature, selling cool stuff. Yeah, it's a good life.
Yeah, if you could look at him and give him one bit of advice, a 16-year-old version of yourself, what do you think you would say?
Tidy up your act, man. Stop picking your nose, wear better clothes, be respectful to women, stop drinking Coke, and...
Did you say snorting Coke?
Yeah,
oh, right.
Drinking Coke and follow your dreams.
Yeah, fantastic. No, that's very good. So what quality of mind or state of mind do you think's best served you in your success?
Well, I don't think about that because my mind isn't very continuous. It's quite discontinuous, right? It flops between craving high stimulus environments. I was on a boat with 2,000 entrepreneurs, 3 days and 3 nights, loved it. But then I retreat into solitude, go running with my dog, enjoy peace and quiet, swim in the sea by myself. So I like kind of compression, decompression type, high stimulus and then let things unfold and see what happens. That's more my pattern.
What's something you believe to be true that not many people agree with you on?
I think I've always believed that the power of design is very human-centered and very commercial. And, I've been involved in Better by Design through NZTE for over a decade. And when we started off, it was just like, what? That's the gay guys in the corner doing the fruity stuff. But people like Steve Jobs have demonstrated that design and innovation is an absolutely, it's basically all a business has got, right? Ideas and the ability to materialize them. So at the very heart of a business is innovation, creativity, storytelling, and customer connection. So people are catching on to that, but I think we're still in the dark ages in New Zealand.
Okay, fantastic. And last question, what's something you've learnt along the way, not necessarily about business, but about life? What would you say is your secret to happiness?
I think about what it takes to be happy when I'm 70, and I kind of work back from that. Right. Because 70 I'm not going to be starting any new businesses, I won't, well, I don't know, maybe I will be, but it's like when you work back from what does it take to be happy in the future, all the answers kind of materialise. It's like when I worked back from what does it take to build an international brand from New Zealand, you got the clues. So I'm kind of a forward back type person.
Yeah. Awesome. So to finish off, Jeremy, it's an amazing story, and I think it's one of those stories that, as you say, it's just in the journey. There's so much to come, but there's so much amazing things that have already happened. So to finish off, can you look down this camera here and tell us what is your $1 million advice for the world of business, entrepreneurship, and making things happen?
To reach into the future and taste it and smell it and feel it, and just write down some stuff to guide your heart and your decision making, and then break it into small chunks. Imagine just some key steps to get there. So start big and act small.
Great, Jeremy Moon, thank you so much.
Cool.
Cheers, appreciate it.